Open your phone right now, and you'll trip over 15 posts about your inner critic. Quiet the inner critic, befriend the inner critic. Here's a journaling prompt for the inner critic. There's an app. Well, there's always an app promising that 4 weeks of self-compassion and meditation will turn the volume down. And for a lot of people, that stuff helps a little. But there's a whole group of people for whom the affirmations don't just fail. They make it worse. They write, "I am safe, I am worthy," in the journal, and a voice inside answers back, "No, you're not, and you know it." Colder than before, like it's offended you even tried. If that's you, or if that's a client sitting across from you, here's what the wellness internet is not going to tell you. That voice might not be your inner critic at all. It might not even be yours. It might be something with a name, installed a long time ago, for a reason that made terrible sense at the time. That's what we're getting into today, and this is Target Memory. So welcome back to Target Memory, the show about the cases and the parts of ourselves that don't move in a straight line and often get stuck in processing. And this show is produced by the Pacific Clinician Collective. It's a developing California educational nonprofit that has been built to support trauma-informed clinicians with professional consultation, reflective practice, and access to advanced trainings in EMDR beyond basic training. It also has offerings with brain spotting and is dedicated to the education of integrative trauma care. I'll tell you more about why a nonprofit makes a podcast like this at the end, because it's tied to the whole point of the show. And good news for the clinicians listening, this episode is eligible for free continuing education credit through Learn at Pinnacle. That's not a side perk. Affordable, accessible continuing ed is literally part of why Pacific Clinician Collective exists. So more on that when we close. For now, if you're listening between sessions or after a long day, that time, let's make it count. All right, some housekeeping, because that's important too. So everything here is for education. It is not therapy, not clinical supervision, not consultation on your specific situation or client or case. So if you're a clinician, you know the line. If you're not, and if you found this because the title named something that you felt was resonating, well, you're welcome here too. And this might change how you hear your own voice in the head sometimes, or inner critic who might not be an inner critic. So, but insight, remember, insight is not treatment. If this stirs something up, that's what a good therapeutic frame is for. And I'll point you toward that at the end too. Okay, the inner critic. Let's complicate it. All right. So what the trend gets right and where it stops. So let me be fair to the inner critic conversation, because it does get something right. There genuinely is a near universal human experience of an internal voice that narrates, judges, second guesses. For a lot of people, that voice is basically an unhelpful mental habit wired in by a critical teacher, a comparison-soaked culture or home life, an anxious parent who meant well. For that version, the toolkit works. Self-compassion practice, reframing, catching the thought and answering it. Real research supports it. If a 4-week self-compassion app takes the edge off your perfectionism, wonderful, genuinely. Here's where the trend stops and where almost nobody in the feed sometimes may follow. So for people with histories of abuse, especially childhood abuse, by someone they depended on, the harsh inner voice is often not a habit. It's not a vague cultural download. It's specific. It uses particular words, sometimes a particular tone. And when these folks try to befriend their inner critic, they hit a wall. The wellness content doesn't necessarily account for because they're not dealing with a critic. They're dealing with a perpetrator introject. So the thing with a name. So let me give you the language the trend may miss. So a perpetrator introject sometimes is defined or described is a part of a person that took on the voice of someone who hurt them and kept it in their memory. Because keeping it somehow felt like it may have been the only option available. There wasn't at the time a sense of a safer alternative. And so picture the original situation. So a child in a home with an adult who is dangerous and unpredictable, but is also the one responsible for your care. So that child has exactly one job: survive until morning. And the psyche does something honestly breathtaking. It internalizes the threat. It builds an inside version of the dangerous person, their rules, their warnings, their contempt. So the child can run the danger simulation in their own head and stay one step ahead. It's like they're always able to track the emotional temperature of the room. They can sense like an emotional earthquake and the inner dynamics of the family of origin that they live in. So they're very good at anticipating danger at a young age. So the child in this situation, they can keep the attachment to a caregiver that they cannot at that moment physically survive without. So they can feel 1 ounce of control in a house with none. So it's not a bad habit. To call it that would be reductionist. And it's not low self-esteem. It's a young person building a smoke detector out of the fire of a volatile emotional landscape. The cruelty is what comes next. The fire goes out, the child grows up, moves away, maybe never sees that person again. And the smoke detector keeps screaming. Decades later, that internalized voice is still on duty, still warning, possibly still shaming, still punishing, because nobody ever told it that the danger passed. It doesn't know it's frozen in the year it was made. And you can see why I am safe, I am worthy in a gratitude journal doesn't just bounce off. It actually can seem like a threat to the whole system, because to that part, dropping its guard is how you get hurt. You're not soothing it. You're asking the bodyguard to put down the shield in a building it still believes is on fire. So why is this surfacing right now? Well, here's why I wanted to talk about this week specifically. There's a real shift in the mental health conversation in mid 2026. People are tired of shallow wellness, kind of a bit of optimism fatigue for so much of, there's pop psychology and then there's psychology, and they can be in two different planes of existence. And in a way, it seems like the mood has turned from give me a coping hack to why am I like this in the first place, kind of getting down to the roots. And it's practitioners who are openly saying in various spaces what the research has shown and seems to keep showing is that for a long and loud long-standing inner critic, a short app course is not enough, and structured work with a trained clinician is actually what can move past a system, a way of functioning, kind of like an entire MO that they don't realize they have. People, everyone's got their blind spots. So in a way, I think the culture could be catching up to something that a lot of the trauma research and trauma therapists have been identifying for quite some time, and that the voice that won't go quiet with affirmations, it is possibly a voice that was never a thought to begin with in the person. It's a part, and parts don't respond to argument; they respond to relationship. Which brings me to the clinicians and the part that genuinely is very interesting and fascinating, because the most recent EMDR research points somewhere unique and, for some, unexpected territory. So, what the newest research is indicating. So, in April 2025, Dr. Michael Coy, an MD approved consultant and trainer, a fellow of the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation, presented something called the Introject Decathexis Protocol at EMDR. Decathexis just means withdrawing the charge that binds something, unbinding the perpetrator part. The framework rests on 3 tasks. So, clinicians that are listening, write these down. Everyone else, this is how the good version of the work actually goes. So 1, orient the part to the present, to the body, to now, to the whole grown-up self, because it's frozen in the time it was made and does not know the danger ended. 2, persuade it to reconsider what protection could look like. Not to leave, not to shut down, but to consider its job might be done differently now. 3, and this one flips the whole approach. Help the other parts feel less afraid of it. Notice what's not on the list, though. Silence it, contain it, box it up, affirmation it into submission. Coy's work and the larger trauma and dissociation literature behind it makes a pointed argument. Approaches that try to suppress or contain that voice tend to limit lasting resolution, because when you treat the scariest part of a person as the enemy, you agree with the trauma. You confirm what the system may already be believing, and that this part is too dangerous to be loved. You become one more voice that may want it gone. And the move that actually seems to give the shift to the desired treatment end goal clinically is that this part, and I'd argue humanely, is to turn toward it with respect, the way you turn toward anything that once kept you alive. When I first heard this, it sounded so similar to a lot of the literature on internal family systems, where they talk about the protector part. So if this resonates to you and you're also very much into internal family systems, well, I'm not surprised, because it's almost like the modalities are navigating to the same place. So the reframe. So here's what I want you to reflect upon with this research from Michael Coy, is that the voice, often a cruel sounding one at times, the one the internet keeps calling your inner critic, if it came from someone who hurt you, it is not the perpetrator. It's a protector wearing the perpetrator's face. The face is the disguise, because underneath the face, the job is protection. And the most common mistake for clients and for the clinicians treating them is mistaking the disguise for the truth and going to target it. So it's almost like it's like a dog that's cornered in an alley. It may not be aggressive, but it's just scared. And sometimes the tactics that's used to protect somebody from future disappointment can sometimes look really almost counterproductive. It's like, I don't ever want to be that happy, because if I am that happy and it lasts a certain amount of time, and then something happens and it goes away, I'll be even more devastated. So it's almost like to be almost overly protective is to push away anything that could be good. And so everything that coagulates around that, the behaviors that aren't pro-social, is coming from like a often unconscious fear of I can't let my guard down because it'll be too dangerous. And that's how fear can be such a grip. Many different modalities have talked about that. So what the recent findings indicate is maybe you don't win by going to war with the part. You just change the relationship to it. And that one thing that's useful and free, because it is a place to not just ponder, but also a place of curiosity of where does this open up a trajectory of different interventions, approaches, and working with a system as opposed to against it unknowingly. So as of January 2025, the Journal of EMDR Practice and Research went gold open access under the AAAS Science Partner Journals program. So the research that you've been told to keep up with and that has been cited in trainings is now actually available to be accessed and read without a paywall. Because prior to the Science Partner Journals program, you had to have some access, and it was not free, or if you had access to, say, certain like library systems with universities, maybe you had access, but it wasn't easily accessible for free for anyone who was interested. So the link is in the show notes. Go to the primary sources, and remember, don't just take my word, and don't take anyone's word. Always double check and always check the source. So let me come back to something that I said at the beginning as to like why a nonprofit like the Pacific Clinician Collective is actually making and producing this show for the Pinnacle Network. Well, target memory is being produced by it, and the reason that matters is the reason that the whole episode matters, like I said. So some of the best trauma work, EMDR, brain spotting, deep brain reorienting, the approaches that actually reach a perpetrator interject instead of arguing with it, sits behind training that is genuinely can get really expensive. If you think of the cost of going to grad school, going through those years of pre-licensure, paying for the exams, the study courses, it starts to add up. So yet on top of that, after licensure, accessing and becoming certified, because one must work within their scope and practice, and that's a licensing board requirement. That's more financing on top of maybe being self-employed, paying back student loans. So a lot of good clinicians who want to do this work for the clients, the community they serve, simply can't afford the path to it in an efficient and effective manner, because it's a need in the community and they want to serve the need, but you have to get trained. And so that is what is called a workforce problem. And it's quickly over time, if it continues, it's a public health problem, because the clients who most need skilled trauma care are the ones who lose when it's hard to find a therapist who isn't trained in it. The therapist that they really work well with can't get trained quickly and appropriately enough, or any therapist that would be a good fit doesn't take their insurance or doesn't take insurance. I mean, there's barriers to access. So Pacific Clinician Collective is being built to chip away at that skills gap. And as an educational nonprofit, the service offerings include affordable continuing education, consultations for certification as an EMDR therapist that does not cost a fortune. And the longer term vision is the one that we're working toward with this show, is a scholarship fund that helps clinicians access trainings that they otherwise couldn't reach. And we're in the early stages. And by doing a show like this, we are on mission, but also it helps put the word out. And as we all know what the cliche says, there's strength in numbers. So, and this is exactly where Learn at Pinnacle fits the mission so congruently, not as a sponsor, but as the point. Partnering with Pinnacle means that the continuing education for this episode is free to you. That's accessibility in practice. So here's the ask that helps everyone at once. So join the Learn at Pinnacle app to earn free continuing ed credit for listening to this episode. You get your hour, the show grows, and the mission moves. It's in the show notes and takes about a minute. But please note, listening to this show with discussions on EMDR and the Perpetrator Introjects, it does not replace MD-approved training, which includes basic training with an approved trainer, as well as the consultations. This is to honor the work, but it is not a replacement for the actual training. So if you want to follow what Pacific Clinician Collective is building, such as consultation groups that are for EMDR trained clinicians who want to certify. Also, we are developing learning labs and eventually a scholarship program. Well, there's a link in the show notes on how to learn more about us. So 2 more things before we go. If you're not a clinician and something landed in what you heard today and landed maybe a little too precisely, that's worth paying attention to and paying attention to gently. You don't have to figure out a voice like this alone, and you're not supposed to. So a trauma-informed therapist that is licensed in your state and has openings and takes your insurance or has an affordable and accessible sliding scale is somebody that you deserve to have in your corner. So if you're a clinician and a specific client came to mind when you were listening, that is a great case to bring to consultation, to your peer consultation group, to any advanced EMDR or trauma-informed trainings that you are participating in or plan to participate in. And if Perpetrator Introject dynamics are what you keep running into, that is the work that my consultations for certification focuses on, and information is also in the notes. So just in terms of those who are EMDR trained who want to begin the process of certification, just so you know, a consultant in training can give you 15 of the consultation hours required as part of the 20 that you'll need to accrue. And one of the benefits of working with a consultant in training is that it is more cost effective because they are training under an approved consultant. So you still get the quality because they are working closely with their approved consultant to make sure that they are staying in fidelity with the treatment. But being certified is a incredible growth journey professionally. But yes, everyone's budget's going to be different. So that's one of the advantages of working with a consultant in training. So if this episode gave you language that you didn't have before, maybe send it to a colleague that might also benefit from hearing the perspective and the work of Dr. Michael Coy. And the friend who keeps apologizing to a voice that was never fair to them would be another person that may benefit from hearing about how to work with Perpetrator Introjects, or the colleagues that have a case that is full of a lot of nuance and complexity. So once again, this has been Target Memory, brought to you and produced from the Pacific Clinician Collective. So remember, the voice isn't always yours, and let's keep figuring out whose it is. So I'll see you in the next episode.